In this session we're going to cover feeding performance. It was originally designed for the Coachaid sports education programme. Very famous exercise nutritionist, physiologist Ron Mon at 1995 World Cross Country Running Championships came out with this quote, which is often used by lots of educators and sports scientists, sometimes maybe not always correctly, but anyway, the winners will without doubt be highly talented, highly trained and highly motivated. At one time that would have been enough, but these days it is highly likely that everyone in the race will have these qualities. Where everyone else is equal, it is diet that will make the vital difference. What gets people to that World Cross Country Championship is usually a combination of genetics, background and coaching. And to get there, they all need good genetics, they all need to have been coached well, and they all need to have had the opportunities along the way to get to that final. On the day itself then, there's certain things will make a difference. Okay, illness and stuff could come into it, but one of the biggest things according to this guy is basically diet. Okay, and the big thing that's going to have made a difference in training, leading up to the event and the day of the event itself is going to be the athlete's diet. And that can be on the day the difference between the winner and the loser. Food is an easy, accessible and enjoyable performance enhancing aid. You need to eat and drink anyway, so why not do it in such a way that it's going to actually aid your performance, aid your training and aid your day of competition. What are the key nutritional issues for performance? Probably firstly is, are you eating enough or are you eating too much? So adequate or appropriate fuel or energy levels. So the amount of calories that we eat. If we want to stay balanced and we want our weight to stay as it is, then we need to make sure we're eating the same amount of calories as we're burning off. If we want to lose weight, because maybe we're carrying a bit extra to weight and we want to lose a wee bit to get down to our race weight or whatever, then we're probably needing to eat slightly less than we're burning off. Now we don't want to have drastic weight loss, so we're just looking to slowly, gradually bring that weight down. And that's usually called a negative calorie balance. Positive calorie balance is when you would eat slightly more than you're burning off. That's when we want to maybe put some weight on. So maybe we want to put some muscle bulk on. So the first issue is, are we eating enough? Second one, are we hydrating properly? Okay, so are we getting adequate amounts of fluid? Timing. We might be eating enough, we might be drinking enough, but are we eating it and drinking it at the right time? Too many of us maybe spend too long between finishing training or finishing competition before we get that initial food into us. And there's a window of opportunity after training or after competition where we can help our recovery by making sure that we eat and eat the right stuff. And if we don't make that window of opportunity, then that can lead to incomplete recovery 24, 48 hours after. Make sure your food is well balanced. So is your diet balanced? Are you getting a good variety of everything that you need? Are you getting the right food types? Are you getting the vitamins and minerals that you actually need in your diet? Are you eating that 5 a day, or are your 5 a day a variety of colours? Habit, something a lot of us have bad ones of, and hopefully some good ones of as well. But try to make your nutrition a habit. Try to make good nutrition a habit, and try to make, especially things like timing, a habit. So make sure it's a habit to have something in your bag so that you can eat immediately after training. Habits usually take about 30 days or so to form, so try to stick with it until that habit's been formed. If we have bad habits, then sometimes it'll take a while to break those habits. So we need to get rid of the bad things that we do and start doing some better ones. Lastly, preferences. There was a programme on TV not so long ago where a particular female was looking at people's diets, people who were quite overweight, put all their food for a week on a table and said about how disgusting it was and all the rest of it, and everybody agreed, and the people agreed, oh, this is terrible. There was litres upon litres of Coke usually, and litres of oils and lumps of butter and lard. And then they got out all the good stuff and sort of put it out as well. And quite often, I think a lot of the people would describe the food as being like bird food. There's a lot of seeds and nuts and stuff and various things included in the good food stuff that this particular individual would have given them. But the problem was a lot of it wasn't liked by the individuals. It wasn't their preference, it wasn't the type of food that they liked. And generally speaking, most of the food they did like, it cut out of their diet completely. And the problem was that is not going to end up forming the habit above. Because yes, they'll do it for the time of the program or the time of, in inverted commas, the diet, but they don't tend to maybe make it into a habit for lifelong. So what we want to make sure is we don't cut out, if an athlete has got a preference for a type of food, then we don't try to cut that food out completely. If they like a Mars bar and that's their favourite chocolate, then let them have a Mars bar. But like everything else, it should be to do with the balance of all the rest of the food they're eating that day, and everything should be in moderation. So don't cut out everything that the person likes, or else they're going to make for a very miserable diet. Said earlier on, your diet is about aiding your performance. If you hate your diet, diet suddenly becomes something that is something you don't like. It gets very heaped up in the person, they can get tense about their diet, then it affects the whole way that they eat. It can lead to other problems as well. So make sure the person still has something in there that they have, that they like, that there's preferences in there that they actually like in their diet, and that we can form good habits from that. Why is food so important? Well, our body requires nutrients obtained from foods and fluids to function properly. Without those macronutrients, the micronutrients of vitamins and minerals, our body can't function properly. So even to break down energy, we need not just the fuels given to us, the carbohydrates, the fats, whatever. We also need various vitamins in there to actually allow that breakdown of energy to happen. Most foods normally have a number of nutrients mixed together in them. Okay, so no foods tend to be just purely one nutrient. So if we're saying, oh, this is a carbohydrate food, usually it's got carbohydrate, yes, but it's going to have something else in it as well. So for instance, milk, it's got carbohydrate in it, it's got protein in it, it's got fat in it, it's got vitamins, and it's got minerals. And we often think of milk as being something we're taking for protein, but remember there's also carbohydrate in there, and it's a great recovery drink. Pasta, carbohydrates, protein, vitamins and minerals. What's not mentioned here is a lot of pasta will also have a certain amount of, a small amount of fat in it as well. So we've got other things in the pasta, not just the carbohydrates that we would usually probably eat pasta for. Most athletes need to sustain large training loads compared to the general population. So they generally need a lot more nutrients, especially carbohydrates. It's eating in a lot bigger numbers than most people. General population is probably eating around about 50%, or should be eating about 50% of their diet should come from carbohydrates, about 35% from fats, and 15% from protein. With an athlete, the carbohydrates should be up, so we're probably looking more closely at about 60% coming from carbohydrate. The one that we cut down then will be the fat. Okay, so if we're up in the carbs by about 10, we'll down that fats down to about 20-25%, and keep protein around about the same, about 15. Energy itself comes from 4 components in our food and our drink. It comes from fats, it comes from alcohol, it comes from carbohydrates, and it comes from protein. Here we've also broken carbohydrates into 2 different bits: sugars and starches, simple and more complex. The exercise intensity will determine the type of fuel that we actually use or burn off. If we were jogging along at a very light pace, okay, 55-60% of maximum heart rate, so a very, very easy jog, we would probably be burning mainly fats. Okay, as we reach steady state, we'll be burning the biggest percentage of fuel being used will be fats. Our body's easily able to cope with it. Fats are slow to produce fuel, although they produce all day long, but they're slow to produce. So at a very pedestrian rate, we'll be burning off fats. As we increase the intensity up, then even the aerobic system becomes slightly more dependent on carbohydrates. So aerobic system will start to burn slightly more carbs. As we keep on increasing it, our pace, that will keep on increasing, but also we become slightly more reliant on the anaerobic system. So as we get up to a fast run, we're still burning off fuels aerobically, but we'll also be switching over to burning off some anaerobically as well. So some of that extra needed energy will be coming from the anaerobic system. And it'll be from our lactate system, and that will be coming from carbohydrates, because our lactate system only uses carbohydrates. Proteins will give us energy, but they're usually mainly spared by the body for this whole idea of repair and regeneration of muscle, and our immune system, repair and regeneration of cells and growth. So we tend to spare protein where we can, and we use mainly just the fats and the carbs. Where is our fuel stored? Well, firstly, when we eat, we obviously break that food down in our stomach, and if it's carbohydrates here, for instance, that is transferred into the blood mainly as glucose. So there's a certain store of glucose then in the blood. That glucose is quite often taken up then by the liver and the muscle and turned into glycogen, and we store carbohydrate in the muscle and the liver as muscle glycogen and liver glycogen. Fats are stored in adipose tissue, and we can see that layer of fat below our skin, or at least feel that layer of fat below our skin for most of us. Muscle will be broken down to excess protein if it's used as an energy source. So if we really need it, if carbohydrates are not present, if we run out of carbs, then we can start burning off our storage of protein, which is basically our muscle mass. Just to give you an idea in terms of the two usable ones, really are carbohydrate and fat. Carbohydrate in the body, in a 70 kilogram or so average meal, average sort of body fat, you're probably looking 2,000 to 2,500 kilocalories stored as carbohydrate. In terms of fat stored in that individual's body, you're looking probably at about 103 to 105,000 kilocalories of fat stored. Okay, and that's for a normal individual without high body fat, just normal body fat, 70 kilograms or so. So a couple of thousand as carbohydrate and over 100,000 as fat. So you can see that fat, you could be able to run all day long at a pace that basically you'll be able to burn off fats. Carbohydrate though, only a couple of thousand kilocalories a day, which is roughly speaking what the average meal would eat a day. So we're not looking as much carbohydrate, therefore carbohydrate is probably going to be a limiting factor, especially when we start doing more intense exercise, as we said, that uses up more carbohydrate. So how does that actually work? Well, we've got two graphs here. The one on the left hand side shows the use of carbohydrate over time, and the one on the right hand side looks at sort of a match environment. So on the one on the left hand side we've got muscle glycogen levels up the y-axis, so up the side, against time along the x-axis and along the bottom. You can see for the first hour or so we've got quite a rapid decrease in carbohydrate levels, and then after the hour we've still got a decrease, but they're starting to level out slightly. It's the amount of carbohydrate being burnt off slows down, and that hour level is quite important. If you're exercising for under an hour, then generally speaking carbohydrate replacement during that exercise isn't probably going to be needed, as long as you have a starting point where you are at adequate levels of carbohydrate to start with. You're probably not going to need to top those up during that hour. However, exercise lasting longer than an hour or so, then you probably are going to need to top up your carbohydrate levels. So exercise lasting below an hour, not really that crucial to top up your carbs, as long as you've your reasonable level to start with. Exercise lasting over an hour, then you need to start thinking about carbohydrate for the whole period of the event, not just after the hour's up, but as you go along. You can see in the second graph on the right hand side then we've got pre-match, half-time and after-match, and we've got somebody who started with adequate levels of carbohydrate on the blue bar, and the orangey bar is somebody who started with inadequate levels of carbohydrate. And we can see then as the match goes on, person's carbohydrate levels start to drop. By half time we were quite considerably down on carbohydrate levels, and by the end of the match then the person who started at inadequate levels is very badly depleted. And what's that going to mean? We'll remember back to saying that as we increase our intensity, we become more reliant on carbohydrate. Well, towards the end of that match, there isn't the carbohydrate there to be reliant on. We can't do that wee element that requires the anaerobic glycolysis. We can't break down those sugars, those carbohydrates anaerobically, because they aren't there for us to break down. Therefore, that means we're not going to be able to go at those higher levels or intensities, so we're going to have to slow down. So you can see that over a period of time, carbohydrates quite quickly can run out, and that we may need to replace those carbohydrates if exercise is lasting more than an hour. Okay, that's the end of this part of the presentation.